Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and I'm actually in, well, it was sunny, California, San Rafael, a place that I actually used to live and work many years ago. Not that many years ago, like 15 years ago. And it's my pleasure tonight to have Ted Peters on our blog. I don't have that up in front of us, but let me just pull that up. For this week is a 1966 UFO police chase report. Check that out. I'm going to be at the UFO Con 2025 coming up this weekend. You can hear I have a little bit of a issue. I had laryngitis, couldn't even talk yesterday, but I'm glad most of my voice is back. But I'm right on a deck overlooking the water here. You'll see Ted in just a second. I want to thank everyone that watches the show, listens to the show, and thank you so much for being here, all those in chat and everything. And I'm going to bring in our guest.
Questions.
Yes, here we go. Yes.
And I'm going to ask you questions that require you to give me long answers. We'll see how long it takes before your voice gives out.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I think one of the things right off the bat I wanted to talk about before we got into the course you're teaching and all that,
yes,
is you met James Fox when he was, we have a studio audience here, I should say.
Oh, we do.
Yeah. And so pardon that noise, but so you met James Fox.
I met James when he was still wet behind the ears. His dad and James came to visit me in Berkeley, and one of my colleagues, Bob Russell, we have a Center for Theology and Natural Sciences in Berkeley, and James was working on what I think was his first film, his documentary, 50 Years of Denial at the time. And so we had a chance to meet his dad and get to know him, and he's become one of my favorite people. We connected again at the Roswell 50th anniversary.
Oh, yeah.
And James got quite enamored with Colonel Corso. You may remember.
Oh, yes, I know.
Colonel Corso claimed to be a firsthand witness of the bodies that were gathered at Roswell and things like that. So at any rate, so that's James and me, but we see his family from time to time and have a little bite to eat.
Yep. And now you're aware, as I told you, he's out in Vermont. Yeah.
And he told me he's skiing in Vermont. So
yes, you should see his beautiful. I did a show with him at his farmhouse, and it's just amazing. As a whole, studio separate from a house with bedrooms and it's just absolutely beautiful. A lot of acreage and a beautiful farm, 1700s farm, massive home. So I was really glad. He's very glad.
Okay.
Yeah, Vermont's such a pretty area. But anyway, so it's lovely to meet you and everyone here, seeing some people here I haven't seen for a while. And actually I have someone in the audience here that I used to know through the antiques world out here who had quite an amazing sighting. I'm going to talk about that later. But anyway, so let's hear how you got into this subject in the very beginning.
I grew up with it. My mother and father just loved reading Donald Kehoe.
Oh, yeah.
Frank Scully. And they were mild disciples of George Adamski. Oh, I remember George Adamski came to Detroit and lectured, and they went. And I was at the front door when they got home. What did you hear? What did you hear? I quickly read the books, and in the 7th grade, I was the neighborhood expert on flying saucers.
Now, did people think you were weird, or your family?
Oh, they did. I did.
Yeah.
One of my favorite friends, Jim Baldwin, is a basketball player, and he thought I was just crazy. And then one night, 11 o'clock, he calls me up on the phone. He says, I just was walking home from basketball practice, and I saw a flying saucer. It was right behind a tree, and it all lit up. And from then on, I was a local hero. So.
Yeah, that kind of changes your whole way of thinking once you have something. I mean, it's kind of undeniable.
Right.
Have you yourself?
I've never had the experience. Yeah. I'll have to tell you, I hope someday we'll meet extraterrestrial intelligences, but as of this point, they have not called me on the phone.
It's kind of funny you hear. I really don't think that matters at all. Stanton Friedman, one of the best
Oh yeah, I
ufologists,
understand. Yeah.
never had a UFO sighting.
That's true.
And there's Stephen Bassett, never had a UFO sighting.
Right,
There's a lot of people that don't, and there's no read. I mean, the reason I got into this topic was I had a sighting. It's not something spectacular, but every time I say I had a sighting, for the new time listeners, they always say, well, how come you didn't tell us what it was? So I'll just say it real briefly.
Yes.
I was here in California.
Yeah.
I was down and at Carmel Valley, some friends, and I lived in Tiburon, not far from here. And some neighbors had a ranch in Carmel Valley, and they said, you're welcome to use the guest house anytime you want. So I was in the guest house, and I got out and went into their hot tub, no bubbles, and sat in their hot tub. I was not drinking. I always have to say that. And all of a sudden, something caught my eye, and I look up. I thought it was a bird at first because it was movement.
Right.
And then I saw a perfectly shaped disc, like a disc with a blue glow around it, and it just goes with. And the thing that freaked me out the most, and I never heard anyone talk about UFOs to speak of, was absolutely no sound. No sound, and then it just stopped.
Right.
And then it stayed right stationary for a while, and then it went on an angle toward Monterey. So I jumped out of the hot tub. I didn't know what to do. I never knew there was any online reporting services or anything. This was in 2007. And I got on the phone. There was a wall phone in the guest house, and I called 911, apologized. I said, it's not an emergency, but is anyone else seeing this? There's a craft flying over. She goes, you mean well, I can't remember if she said a UFO or a flying saucer, but whatever it was, very much sarcasm. There was a lot of sarcasm. So she kept me on. She said, hold on. And I was on hold for, seemed like 20 minutes. And I finally hung up. And so I kind of forgot about it.
Well, I think a MUFON investigator would like to know the details of that.
Yeah, I have looked it up. I found something that there was a sighting in November, and I think it was in 2007 over Monterey. So I got to do. I really should do a little more. Here I am doing the show, and not
I'm curious about the blue light. Was it just sort of like all by itself, or did the light actually shine onto something and give it a blue sheen?
I can say it looked like blue plasma around it.
All right, okay.
And it was like a cold blue color, and So the next like that was a Sunday or Saturday, Monday, I went into work and I told someone that I was mentoring there at an auction gallery. And I told her, I said, don't tell anyone. 5 minutes later, people are teasing me.
Yes, so, I understand.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I think the ridicule factor has dropped quite a bit. And
well, since 2017, it's gone down a lot because so many credentialed scientists are stepping up and saying, this is a scientific problem. It deserves legitimate attention. Yeah.
And is this, we're going to be talking about your course that you have in the summers at Berkeley. But was this the reason you feel more comfortable at this time? I mean, would you have done it if that article never came out?
No, I never flinched with regard to this. Back in the 1970s, when it became known that I was a professor who studied UFOs, there would be a cocktail party or something and say, oh, Dr. Peters, he studies UFOs. And then people I was just meeting would say, oh, I see another friend over there. I got to talk. So I got used to it. I laughed it off. If my tenure were threatened, I had a different attitude, but it never was.
Now, let me ask you this, though. When you're at a party, this is what happens to me. I'm going to ask if it happens to you. When you say, I do, think what you may, but I do a show on UFOs. And then, my brother had, does this happen to you?
Out of every 5 or 10 people, you're going to find at least one who has an experience or is close to an experience. It's not that rare.
Yeah, not rare at all. Some of the best stories that I've gotten from people are just,
they happen that way, sure.
Yeah, you just fall into it. I had a hat, MUFON hat. Someone stopped me and told me the whole story.
Right. I have an Area 51 hat and went and blew off into the lagoon. I lost it.
Oh, God. Oh, that's funny. So when did you, decide to actually put this course together? I mean, or have you had them before?
I started, believe it or not, with the Erich von Däniken craze. I had studied the history of religions at the University of Chicago, and suddenly Erich von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods are on television and movie theaters. And a survey went out of the 5 most important, most widely read books by undergraduate college students. And in the list, there was von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods, and the other 4 were on sex. So I think that this is a pretty important topic. So I read the book, and then I remembered back when I was a kid, I gathered all this information. So I called up my father and I said, "Do you remember the scrapbook on UFO sightings?" "Yeah," he says, "I've been keeping it up." Oh my gosh, I had a treasure. So I offered this course. I was at Newberry College in South Carolina at the time. Oh my gosh, 64 students immediately wanted to sign up for this course. So
that's great.
Then I got reinterested. I became a MUFON investigator. And so for the last few decades, I've been kind of tracking the contemporary phenomenon pretty closely.
Do you still do investigating?
No, I don't.
Now, did you do any work here in this area when you were doing?
No, I was the state director for Louisiana for a period. And then when I moved to California, we already had plenty of really good investigators. And I like the more theoretical stuff anyway. What does it mean for culture? What does it mean for society?
Oh, because
and
of your
my
background.
area is, science and religion. What is the meaning of all of this? I mean, the big question from 1947 until the present is, are they real?
Yeah.
And then are they real? The question is, do they come from outer space?
Yeah.
That question's not been answered. So I like to ask different questions.
Let's throw, what other type of questions?
Well, I like to ask about the curious intersection between science, politics, and religion, and to some extent, psychology. What's going on? Are there any myths at work here? And I think there's one really big myth that you'll find both amongst ufologists as well as astrobiologists. Remember, we wanted those scientists to pay attention to UFOs for a while, and the astrobiologists would say, "We know there's life in outer space, but they're not visiting us." Oh, really? But here's the myth. The myth goes like this. Evolution is progressive. And the more highly evolved you are, the more scientific you are, and the more technological you are. And therefore, if there's an extraterrestrial civilization that is more advanced than ours by 1,000,000 years, they'll be more scientific, and they'll be more technological than us, and they'll be more moral. They'll have found, even Carl Sagan, the astrobiologists, believe this, that they will have found a way to live together without nuclear war.
Yeah.
Now, there's zero evidence for any of this. It contradicts the theory of evolution, but it's widely believed. I'm thinking, how does this myth work, both in ufology as well as in astrobiology, even though these people don't attend the same barbecues?
Right. I think we have Canada geese. Is that what we have?
See that?
Am I hearing Canada geese?
Yes, you are hearing Canadian geese. They fly over and they talk a lot.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they're saying, but they talk a lot.
So this question, basically, what are UFOs? That's a really good one. And anytime someone says they know what they are, then I kind of walk away because I feel like, we don't have any evidence. We know there's something happening. We just don't understand exactly what it is.
That's the fascinating thing, that here we are 3/4 of a century later, we can see it and we don't understand it.
Yeah. And we may never,
Right.
I mean, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, have you been following what's happening with there's been 2 hearings in Washington? And
to some degree I have, and that's another thing, and I'd love your opinion on this, Martin. Since 2017, now this 8 years later, we have the same kind of back and forth with Washington that we had in the 1950s, and again in the 1960s, and again in the 1990s, And we're the same place we were. We get these testimonies, the garish testimonies, about investigations and non-human intelligent evidence and all of that. And we're still at the same place. What is going on here? Despite disclosure aggression for 30 years, we still don't have the answer. So I have to go back to myth. What's going on here? And I had mentioned the Roswell 50th anniversary. So I don't know if you remember, but during the 90s, we had Montana revolutionaries with guns and things, and they showed up at Roswell in their RVs with their Weber grills and their families, and they're cooking burgers and they're having this wonderful time. And I'm kind of worried with all this anti-government talk, what if the UFO people and these sort of mountain revolutionaries get together? They're going to hate it. Didn't happen. Here's what I think is going on. We love the power of Washington. And if we think that Washington has a special connection with the extraterrestrial intelligences, and they're keeping it from us, so exciting. And it's almost a reactive formation. We're angry at the government for not telling us, but we're so proud that our government has an extraterrestrial connection. That was the best I could get out of this. And it seems to me, if I'm right, and I might be wrong, if I'm right, no matter how much gets disclosed, it'll keep right on going. Oh, you haven't told us all yet. You haven't told us all yet. It's going to go on in perpetuity because we don't want to know the answer unless it's the one we believe in already.
That makes sense. One of the things I've said many times on this show, the possibility that the government may know more. I do believe they know more than we do.
Sure.
Maybe not just our governments, maybe other governments, but I don't think they know the whole picture. And I ran this by Jacques Vallée recently, but he went into his reasoning why, that they may not know even more than we do, or much more. But I think that if they don't know the whole picture, then they can't tell us they can protect us, and obviously
I think that's a good hypothesis, right?
But they're benevolent as far as we know, whatever they are.
Everybody who knows a lot about the phenomenon knows they're not a military threat to us.
Yeah.
They're just not.
Now, I listened to Kurt Jamal does the theory of everything. And he had Professor, I want to say, John Hansen on. I may have the wrong name, a professor.
Mm-hmm.
And he thinks that his thoughts, I'm actually going to try to get him on the show, but his thoughts are that there is alien life out there, but it's just on the edge of us being able to see us, and they may be somehow controlling us in some type of way. But I mean, it's an interesting theory. Again, these are all theories.
Does this overlap with the zoo hypothesis? Do you happen to know?
I think I did hear that term.
Yeah, right. And you and I are like animals in a zoo, and maybe they buy tickets and Zeta 2 Reticuli to take a look at it.
Or what's up? I've had some that supposedly worked during Vietnam, studying UFOs, what was happening there. When I asked him what the government thinks they are, and he said, we're a petri dish, which I thought was very interesting.
Well, that fits with some of the ancient astronaut theories where we are biological experiment, a genetic experiment of some sort. I find almost no evidence for this, but we might as well launch our theories, right? And the extraterrestrial hypothesis is by far and away the most popular, but we've got all these other ones bouncing around.
Interdimensional
time theory is a big one. The future coming back for us. I think Jeffrey Kripal is the one that
Dr. Michael Masters.
Michael Masters, yes.
Kripal's done some.
Kripal is interdimensional, isn't he?
I think so.
Yeah.
I've tried to get him on the show. He says way too busy. He's at Rice University.
Right, he's at Rice. Yeah, it's a good school. Yeah.
Now, what do you think about, there's a lot of talk where people, I want to say within the last couple of years, they say that it's related to consciousness. And I don't, no matter how many times people have tried to frame it for me, I think I can't quite understand what they mean by that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do have some thoughts, but let me give you a little backstory and then come back to the question. The area I've really been looking at and have become quite excited over since 2017 is we've had a need for serious scientific research in which the evidence gathering, the data gathering, experimentation, and all these things are done at a professional level, and that's happening now. The really good news is that the serious scientists have gotten involved at a high level. This is great. But there are certain dimensions of the phenomenon that don't fit the scientific paradigm, and consciousness is one of them. And so many experiences, perhaps not you, but many experiencers really feel a change in their way of thinking. And in some cases, as you well know, not exactly voices, but their thoughts are triggered, not necessarily manipulated, but definitely influenced by a UFO experience. And so you get some people say, well, we've got to deal with the paranormal. Well, at that point, your scientist says, excuse me, I think I've got another appointment. But you can see why we need to look at the paranormal, because who else gives consciousness, the time of day? But even though there are some aspects of the UFO phenomenon that fit paranormal categories, consciousness is a bigger category. And there are lots of things that go on in my consciousness that even the paranormal doesn't cover. So how are we going to study that? Let me just say that's kind of where I am right now. And with some of my colleagues, I'm trying to propose ways of getting in there. So I like symbols and how symbols resonate in the individual psyche and in the community and things of that nature. So I getting right back to your question, I got the same question too. How are we going to handle consciousness? Because it belongs there. And you can't pretend that it's not part of the phenomenon.
Yeah. There were some arguments that I had with one person, but I don't know if it totally fit. But they were saying that, people were seeing these things, and it was, through their consciousness, and that and it was like they were talking like single person sightings. And I said, well, what do you take when there's like the Phoenix Lights, when there's like 1,000 people
right.
that see something? How does that work? Because then he would say, well, there's 2 or 3 people together, and it's all like they're all, their minds are all kind of thinking they're seeing something.
Mm-hmm.
So he was kind of pushing it off like they weren't really seeing a nuts and bolts type of situation.
Nuts and bolts is a good way of defining the limits of the scientific or empirical side of it. But as you undoubtedly know, there are some people who feel or claim that they can call a UFO into vision.
Yeah,
right?
There's a lot of talk about that recently.
And
Jake Barber.
We need to understand that. What's going on there? And then the question of, is it only consciousness? Is it only subjective? Is it only your imagination with no empirical component at all? Well, I don't want to give up the empirical component. There are objects.
Mm-hmm.
So we need a method for keeping the subject and object together. Some philosophers are using phenomenology, where that's a method for keeping subject and object together, and you look at it as a unit. I'm somewhat sympathetic with that.
Yeah. Earlier you mentioned astrobiology, right. I believe. And I just want to tell you real quickly, I've said this a number of times because I think it's a fascinating statement by an astrophysicist that I had on my show, Jeffrey Bennett, several years ago. And he basically said that when he was at NASA as a visiting scientist, that water cooler talk was, if a society can go through the bottleneck of technology without blowing themselves up, they'll be traveling the stars.
Yeah, that's the Carl Sagan argument for what I call the UFO or the ETI myth. And it's a way of saying, curiously, that if we advance enough in technology, we're going to advance morally.
Hopefully.
There's a yeah, but let me just say, is there any evidence for that? Any evidence, even the slightest shred? I don't think so. But be that as it may, I hope Sagan was right. I hope that one of these civilizations has advanced morally and they know how to govern themselves in peace. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I hope it's true. No evidence, but I hope it's true.
Yeah. Well, I brought this up recently because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe it's a little weird for some people, but Jack Weiner, from one of the 4 people at the Allagash incident many years ago, he said that, you know, he had basically beings visited him at his house later, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot for anyone to take.
Yes, it is.
But he mentioned something about the being was communicating with him. Mentioned something about our galaxy that we didn't know at the time, and so he recalled that, and he, you know, wrote it down and whatever, and ended up being true, whatever that being supposedly told him. But one of the things he was shown is that there's a point where the highest intelligence in the galaxy or whatever is this area there, and they got to this place by way of unconditional love.
I'm for that. Well,
and then, I mean, it's pretty bizarre.
Yeah, yeah.
But he said that he was like touched, and he felt, and he says, I'm not a touchy-feely guy. I'm not anything like that.
Yeah.
And he said, but it was the most overwhelming feeling he ever had in his life. So, I mean, if there's something to that, I mean, I think that's the only way we can really advance, is to be able to, I mean, can you imagine if people could accept each other and there would be all this tribal warfare?
Well, this is one of the reasons why I put my heart into the UFO phenomenon, because that's really been the message since the day the Earth stood still in 1951. And you find it especially in the contactees, but to a less extent further out in the UFO phenomenon. It's been a good message. And then in the late 1980s with the abduction phenomenon, etc., now we're going to be concerned with the health of the planet. And, you know, so we have stop nuclear war, we have ecological ethics and morality, and aliens teach us that we should love one another. We'd heard that message before a few times, I think, but to hear it again, you know, thank God for sending us technological angels.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people think that somehow the extraterrestrials are going to save us from ourselves. Like if we go into a nuclear war, you know, there were
a major theme. Yes.
Yeah. And I know, you know, there were some nuclear warheads that were shut down.
Right.
You know, and there were that couldn't have been shut down in any other technical way.
That's evidence. That's what I would consider evidence. Yeah.
And you would think it would be national security enough where they'd be paying attention and trying to figure it out.
Right. Exactly.
But that hasn't happened. I'm just looking up. I thought I saw a raindrop.
Oh, the heavens are crying on us right now.
Oh boy. And so I'm not sure if there. Karen, is there an umbrella somewhere that I can hold over the computer? Okay. So I just mentioned your wife. She is kind of into the topic.
Karen is, and oops, she walked away. So I can say this quickly. Her brother, Jim, who's not with us, is an experiencer with a group.
Oh, really?
And Karen and Jim will sometimes go up on a mountaintop, and not far from here, actually, and wait for the UFOs to come, and they do. And they haven't done it in a year or two, but yeah.
And they actually have. Thank you so much. Yeah, this will save the day right here. Thank you. Yeah. So they actually have, well, I'm going to have to look over.
Well,
Karen, you got
yes.
seen things on the mountain?
Yes.
I don't know if you wanted to walk around.
Yeah, well, come over here and talk into my mic,
Oh, this
Karen.
is fun.
I'll talk into your mic. Yeah, thank you. Well, I had an experience with a woman by the name of Celestine. I don't know if she's someone you had ever met, but she, her, what should I say? Her story was that she actually has contact and can call these ships to come. And you sit in the pattern on top of, well, it was like Turtle Mountain in Fairfax, where supposedly no aircraft are allowed because of the Golden Gate Bridge and security reasons.
Yeah.
And we would see balls of light. They'd appear and then they would go away. And then this one night I was there and they had a number of, they were right overhead, triangular shaped with, as I remember, a blue light at each corner of the triangle.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh.
And
did you try to take pictures?
I couldn't. I mean, it was just, it somehow they're far enough away that nothing comes out. It was kind of just this little blob.
Yeah. Yeah.
My brother, however, I was not with him at this time, had a large ship that was very low. And he was so aghast that he couldn't get to his camera in time.
Oh, wow.
Which I think is part of the problem. I think that there is something so emotional about, and then questioning am I really seeing this?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that I was doing some improv and I mentioned it to my improv teacher because I thought it'd be kind of a fun thing to do an improv. And he said, "Oh, we used to go all the time up to the mountain near I'm not exactly, it would be on the way to Stinson Beach in Mill Valley. And we'd sit there and watch them. He said he saw them all the time."
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's funny when I lived here, I had mentioned before that when I first started, right after I sort of forgot about things until like a few years because of the ridicule factor.
Oh, the ridicule, sure.
Yeah. So
I get it.
But I didn't get involved. I didn't talk to anyone here in Marin County. And Sarah, who's in the other room, has been listening to my show. She lives right here. I've been listening to the show for many years.
Right.
And so I've always been told there's a lot going on around here.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mount Tam, is there
Mount Tam?
Yeah.
A lot of,
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this whole area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it was like he was sort of nonplussed. I thought I was saying something really important. He said, "Oh no, we see them." I think they even found ways to sit in the hot tub and
watch. That's the Marin way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you explain how does your course work?
Well, two of them. I've got a summer school course with the Society for UAP Studies, and anybody can find out about that. It's a non-credit course. It's online. We'll meet Tuesday afternoons for Tuesday evenings for 3 hours, June, July, and August. And anybody can take that course. Then I'm going to do an academic course here at the Graduate Theological Union in the spring of 2026. And I'll have a friend in college, J.J. Hertak, will be teaching with me in that. And that'll be an academic course for master's and doctoral level students. But the summer school course will be a nice review of what happened from 1947 to 2025. And we're going to take a look at different explanations for UFOs. And of course, we'll spend a lot of time on the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And then I'll sneak in my little stuff about the ETI myth and a few things of that nature.
And so Diana Pasulka, do you know who she is?
I have read her book, yeah.
Okay. She has been on the show. I'm trying to get her back.
Good.
She's been on the show.
Yes.
But so I want to talk a little bit about the theology, relationship with the topic. I mean, a lot of people think that people see this as a type of religion, but I don't myself. I think that there's really something to this.
Yeah, right.
Maybe I'm in denial, but I don't think it. But I can see like it can have like a following, like
Yes.
sort of in that manner. But so what do you think the
Well,
relationship?
what has happened, religion can mean a variety of things. And if you mean a religious group or institution, since the days of George Adamski in the early 1950s down to the present time, we've had groups form. My wife Karen just mentioned Celestine. There's a whole group that formed around her. She passed away recently, unfortunately, of cancer, but there was a whole group there with the whole cosmology, and the extraterrestrials played a very important role, and there was the peace message. So that's one way. Then there's this phenomenological way. You're probably aware that Carl Jung wrote this book in 1959 called Flying Saucers, Myth of Things Seen in the Sky. And so what he looks at are structures. For example, perfection, okay? The flying saucer is round. And there's one form of perfection that is really overlooked. And if you take a look at the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, there are only two UFO movies that are authentic, in my opinion. Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951, Close Encounters, 1977. In The Day the Earth Stood Still, the flying saucer is on the Washington Mall, and somebody reports that they tried to drill into it with a diamond drill, and they couldn't even chip it.
Yeah.
All right. My father was an automotive engineer. He had this utopian dream. Someday, I'm going to devise a door so perfectly when you close it, you can't see the crack. That was my father's dream as an engineer. What did you see in the movie?
Yeah.
You couldn't see the crack, and suddenly the door opened. Jung says that symbolizes perfection in people's minds. They have advanced in evolution, science, and technology to the point of perfection. They are our own future coming back to us. Now, from Jung's point of view, this is psychic structure. I want to say it's a cultural structure in which science and technology are implicitly worshipped as that which is going to save the human race from its imperfection on behalf of perfection. And I don't want to say this governs the whole phenomenon, but you'll see this theme all the way through. That's a religious theme. It doesn't have any religious bells or whistles. It doesn't have any statues and artwork, but it's a way of asking science and technology to do for modern people what spirit, angels, and things did for our ancestors. Now, Diana Pazulka sees a little bit of that. She probably isn't as thorough as I am in trying to make that analysis. And again, I don't want to reduce the UFO phenomenon like Carl Jung did to only this. But I just want to say that's one of the reasons why it's such a gripping phenomenon. It holds our attention decade after decade.
Right. You mentioned that both of your parents were into the UFO.
Yeah.
Now, did they have any sightings?
No, they didn't, but they just loved being in groups of people where others could talk about their sightings.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I don't know how you feel, but this has been kind of a lifelong thing for you, but not for me.
Yeah, right.
And so I feel like my life has been totally enriched by looking into this topic.
Well, good for you. And once you start meeting people in the UFO world, they're nice people.
They are. And at first, I thought they must be lunatics. I mean, I had no idea.
Right.
And then I started. Who's this Stanton Friedman? A nuclear physicist, and who's this?
Right.
Doctor. Now, I'm not going to get into Dr. Greer, but that's But at first, and Dr. Greer, I have to say, he did do nice things at one point. But I'm going to leave it there.
Okay. We'll leave Stephen Greer right there. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. But then, Bud Hopkins was
yes, I didn't know him personally, but I knew his work.
John Mack was very
John Mack I knew
incredible.
Personally, yes.
Oh, you did? I worked for someone in the antiques world that he was also a professor at Harvard.
Yes.
and knew John Mack, and he was really upset at what they were trying to do to him. And
the Harvard pressure they put on him. Yeah.
But luckily they reversed their
didn't prevail.
Yeah.
He didn't deserve that bad treatment, not at all.
That's right. And and today I don't think that would happen. Do you, as much? You know, that they would give up. Oh, you think it still would? Yeah.
It depends on what his politics are.
Yeah.
No, I agree that after 2017, I mean, let's contrast John Mack with Avi Loeb. All right.
Right. Yeah.
So John Mack gets excoriated. Avi Loeb brags, I'm at Harvard. Yeah. I believe in extraterrestrial life. I'm going to find evidence. Same school, two really different songs that they sing.
Yeah. And then Avi's gotten all types of, funding for the Galileo project.
Right.
And I mean, it's quite amazing. And he's been on my show about 5 times.
Oh, good. Yeah. Is he fun?
He is. He's very regimented about everything. Get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and run 5 miles. Like this is everything he does is
good for him.
When he was out on the ship, he was telling me that he was running on the ship, and they're doing some exploring they found these little spherical things, but they ended up being nothing. They thought it was possibly an extraterrestrial
artifact,
type of artifact that may have just come from another solar system.
Right.
But anyway, it's fascinating. I'm glad that he's in it. And the SCU is another that organization.
Yes, the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. I like those people a lot, and they are really working at setting up the parameters for experimentation and data gathering. Good people.
Yeah.
I
can get you involved with them if you want to be involved with it. Here, we can talk off mic. But anyway, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But anyway, some really good people in that. And I remember Kevin Knuth. He's a professor also.
I've met Kevin. Yeah.
Nice guy.
Yeah, he is.
And Kevin, when I very first had him on the very first time, he said he knew someone they go to these conferences, and this guy was into earthquake lights, and he said, "Oh, this guy's nuts."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, he finds out the guy really had something. There was really something going on.
Yeah.
He said, "I want to be that guy in UAP."
Well, Kevin, like Robert Powell, has really worked hard to set the scientific parameters for doing good research. We need people like that.
Yeah. Robert Powell's a great guy. Does really nice work. So, where do you think the future is, as far as, do you think we're going to, you mentioned earlier, I'm starting to lose my voice here, but you mentioned earlier that we kind of seem to go into the same cycle. Do you believe that's going to?
Well, first of all, I like the fact that there are some, and they're not just old people like me, there are some who want to retrieve the history, thinking there might be something in the history that will tell us about the future. I hope that's true. I don't see it yet. But again, what I think is the frontier taking us to the future is to get Robert Powell and Kevin Knuth and these scientists to really help us professionalize the scientific side. But then we need some kind of discipline within the humanities to deal with the cultural side, which is going to include the paranormal. It's going to include consciousness studies. I'm not smart enough to figure out what that method is. But like I say, I'm kind of glad the phenomenological philosophers are coming in. Maybe they'll have the future. Now, that's all the academic side. I'm a professor. I love academics. But wouldn't it be nice if somebody would have the experience with the evidence that would solve the "are they real" question?
Yeah. And do you think that programs like AARO, do you think, I don't know how much you've looked into them.
I haven't had any connection there, and will-o'-the-wisp kinds of things.
Yeah.
No, I think that's still part of that enigma with what does the government know and not know.
Yeah. And I'm not gonna really bash them. I hope they can change and with the new director, because there was a lot of things that were said that did not really. It was kind of like a window dressing type of thing, which some people say Project Blue Book was, like because they had another file with the really good stuff.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But I think the idea that the military is, they're taking that more seriously.
That's right. These are good signs, I think. Yeah. There ought to be a good reason for us to think positively about a government partnership on what's going to happen in the next 5 years, for example.
Yeah. Now, philosophically, I'm going to just say, if these were traveling from another planet, let's say, extraterrestrial, would you think they would be like us in any type of way? The way I always say that we're always thinking in human terms. I think we have no clue. But do you think it's a natural way of developing over evolution of any type of species? And we have a lot of species on this planet that, have developed. But do you think when it gets to intelligence that they'll behave similar to us? Would you?
I think that's really an important question that needs further theoretical reasoning. Carl Sagan used to say, well, if intelligence grew up on a planet that had a lot more gravity, the people would look like turtles. Well, there's a certain, but there's an evolutionary biologist in England named Moritz, and he has a convergence view that there really is only a finite number of options in evolution for intelligence, and the gripping hands and the 2 legs and feet, and these are optimal for intelligence to develop. And so when he deals with a SETI or somebody talking about extraterrestrial life, he says the likelihood that they're going to look like us is pretty high. Now, I think we need to hear more of that kind of conjecture. One of the things that a side issue here is, what is intelligence anyway? And if you take a look at the controversy in artificial intelligence, most of the scientists don't have a theory of intelligence. And the critics say the only intelligence we know is embodied. It's got flesh and blood.
Yeah.
So if you have a theory of intelligence that doesn't take that into account, you've got a ways to go. So there may be some good reason to argue they're going to look kind of like us because embodied intelligence demands certain ways of physically relating to the world. I think that's a reasonable, more reasonable than the Carl Sagan view, but boy, we're really out on the horizon, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the optimal, you're right. I mean, opposing thumbs, you could go into a lot of different things, the, binocular vision and all that. But when you talk about things like that, I've always wondered not only like gravity differences and how things react to that, but most of the solar systems that are out there are binary solar systems. And so that would mess gravity all. I mean, the poles and the
we'd have to speculate about that. That's right. Yeah.
There's all kinds of different ways, and but anyway, it's all very interesting. Someone has a question here. I'm going to pull it up here. Would you support a new organization? Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Dedicated to setting up public debates between ufologists, skeptics, and between ufologists and ufologists?
I think the current organizations could do that if they wanted to. The debates with the skeptics, I have found interesting. I read the Skeptical Inquirer.
Oh, yeah.
Just for a little cleansing,
Sure.
And I think there really could be some healthy debates about that. A few sacred cows would get gored, I think. But yeah, I think that could happen from time to time. Or let's put it this way: the questioner's right; it ought to happen. Who organizes it probably doesn't matter.
Yeah. One of the arguments I always pose to a skeptic, I've had a number of them on this show.
Oh, good.
Including Seth Shostak. He's been on it.
Oh, I know Seth,
yeah. Thank you for the cough drop. But, the main argument you hear from a skeptic is the distances are too far. And it's
Exactly.
true. The distances are very,
They're
very far.
right.
But
Factually
maybe
right.
they figured something out in a million years.
Yeah, and whether an astrobiologist or ufologist, can we go faster than light?
Right.
You know, I mean, everybody's asking that
or does
question.
even distance matter in different
Yeah.
ways? You know, there's a theory of folding space-time, like,
That's right.
you know, and to go through the fold, you know, or the wormhole or whatever it is. It's all just things that, you know, we
Right.
may, or someone else may have figured out something
That's right.
that we can't even
That's right.
imagine. Here goes the cough drop. We'll see if that'll work. But we have about 5 minutes left. So you were talking about your two different courses. The second course, you said, is accredited course?
Yeah, and that will be in our doctoral studies program with masters and doctoral students who are engaged in either religious studies or theology or something like that. As I mentioned, we have a program in science and religion here. And the UFO question really is one of the places where they all come together. You know, the cocktail party where the scientists won't talk to you. That's part of the phenomenon. Why won't they?
Yeah.
So we'll bring astronomers and astrobiologists in and talk to them. What's going on with you? You know,
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that we'll do in order to. We don't have to have people agree with each other in order to learn from them.
That's right. That's right. Now, how are your feelings? Do you believe that the thoughts of, like, David Grush coming out and say there's crash retrievals?
Right.
Do you think that's a step too far? Do you think there's a possibility of that?
Where's the evidence?
Yeah.
I mean, David heard this secondhand. He didn't see the evidence. Colonel Corso says he saw the evidence. I don't believe him.
Mhm.
Again, there is a way of testing that. Show the world the evidence, and then we'll believe it. And David Grush didn't do that, so it just remains a question.
Yeah. And, you know, that may be solved, but do you think the world as you know it, if there was evidence and we said, here it is, do you think people would believe it?
It would, but if the evidence turns out to be the corpse of an alien who looks kind of like us, but maybe gray, that won't end the phenomenon, because you still got all these psychic dimensions and symbolic dimensions and the hope for a civilization that will be able to solve the tension over nuclear weapons or solve the tension over ecology. Those things will probably morph a little bit and then take a different form. So that's one of the weaknesses of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, because if they're just like us, that's not enough. We want more.
That's something I never thought of. That's really incredible.
Yeah.
And, you know, would they even trust, say, if it's the United States?
Yeah.
If today someone announced in our government or
Right.
whatever, say even the president announced, you know, here it is. This is what we've been waiting for. Do you think how many people would believe him, and how many, or any president?
I think you're right in speculating. A lot of people say, oh, don't believe him. Don't believe him. Don't believe him. Yeah, it's just a political stunt. And
I mean, the thing I've heard a lot of people say that, you know, disclosure could come by force. In other words, a mass sighting that's just undeniable.
Right.
Like a big,
like the Phoenix Lights. How about
yeah, that didn't work so well. But like to say something, you know, like was hovering over somewhere for a long time, and they could see that it was a structured craft, maybe something coming down or whatever. You know, I mean, I don't know if that would even do it still.
Well, it's important that you ask that. And for me, it would, because I really like the extraterrestrial hypothesis. As I said, it probably wouldn't do it for some people who were looking for something more. And there's another scholar you haven't mentioned, Brenda Densler, who also looks at the religious dimensions of these things. And the question is, what does it mean? and people sort of want to know what the whole thing means. So we are not alone. We've never been alone. How much meaning does that have? And if you find out the answer that we're never alone, is there another question that we've got? Especially if they're coming here, just to sell us something.
I mean, I think it would be, I can't prove it, but I think it would be almost impossible that would be the only life in the universe.
Statistically, the astrobiologists are right. With all these planets in just the Milky Way, there's going to be so many that are, in the habitable zone.
Yeah.
Even without empirical evidence, you can say, gee whiz, we got to have neighbors out there,
Yeah, but what sparks the first life? That's the big question. I know they're trying to find it in the lab.
Nobody answers. There are some theories, but none of them are persuasive.
And then there's, I'm sure you've thought about panspermia, where, like
I like panspermia. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but it has to start somewhere as well.
Exactly. It only pushes the philosophical question back a couple steps.
That's right. All right. So you've been very, very enjoyable to talk to. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks. And I wish you well as you continue your investigation. Even though you got a late start, you're already at high speed.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, take care, and we'll see you over the weekend.
All right.
All right, everyone. I'll be back next week. I don't have a guest lined up yet, but it's probably going to be someone at the conference. I had someone lined up and they switched to the end of the month. But anyway, thanks so much. We'll be back next week. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.